deadly earthquake off the coast of Greece and Turkey. The magnitude 7 quake toppling buildings, injuring hundreds. Rescuers are now frantically searching for survivors overnight. Battleground blitz. The Trump and Biden campaigns crisscrossing the Midwest today with 3 states each.
We're going to change the course of the country and, quite frankly, the world.
We just want normal. Bring us back 7 months. That's what we want, right? And that's what the whole world wants.
The president playing down the COVID crisis as it hits record numbers.
But deaths are way down, and where people are getting better. But I'm an example of it.
And the president's son says COVID-19 deaths are, quote, almost nothing, while just today alone, at least 977 Americans have died. The biggest concern across the country from election officials right now, misinformation, nefarious entities trying to deceive voters, the lies being spread, and how you can spot voter suppression. COVID reality check. While the president tries to convince voters we're rounding the corner, the pandemic is reaching new records in the U.S., rising in 43 states. The government's testing chief warns the numbers are real, saying hospitalizations and ICU admissions don't lie. Farmers fighting for survival consider which candidate will help sustain them. How President Trump's trade policies may have given Biden an opening in once solidly red territory in the Heartland. And for most, 2020 has been frightening enough. But this is Halloween, and if you're braving a haunted house, what you might want to consider and how you and your family and friends should prepare yourselves. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. In just the last 24 hours, the U.S. has reported 92,630 new COVID cases. That's the highest daily record yet. And just to put that in perspective, there are 86,400 seconds in a day. So we're talking about more than 1 COVID diagnosis every single second in this country. And just 4 days until the election, which is expected to shatter voter turnout records. Both President Trump and Joe Biden spent the day barnstorming states in the Midwest where there are multiple COVID spikes. President Trump holding large rallies in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota today. Biden, with his busiest day yet on the campaign trail, hitting Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, addressing socially distanced crowds. And, of course, everything is bigger in Texas, including voter turnout this year. Senator Kamala Harris made several stops in the Lone Star State today, hoping the historic turnout will turn the state blue for the first time in decades. Our Mary Bruce leads us off with the race to the finish.
In a sign of how the pandemic has transformed this race, Joe Biden today beginning the final stretch in Iowa. It's a state Trump won by 10 points in 2016, but now with one of the highest COVID rates in the country.
Donald Trump has waved the white flag. He surrendered to this virus. But the American people don't give up.
It's Biden's busiest day of the trail yet. He and President Trump eyeing the same turf, both holding events in Minnesota and Wisconsin. The president also in Michigan as well.
Thank you.
No social distancing at any of his rallies, and most in the crowd not wearing masks. One person who was, Fox News host Laura Ingraham, and the president mocked her for it.
I can't recognize you. Is that a mask? No way. Are you wearing a mask? I've never seen her in a mask. Look at you. Oh, she's being very politically correct. Whoa.
Then on to Wisconsin, now being ravaged by the virus with the 4th highest rate in the country for new cases. Our Jordan Phelps pressing the president.
Mr. President, do you think it's at all dangerous to be holding these big rallies while the numbers are going up here?
No, I don't at all, no. And they're outdoor rallies. They're all outdoor. Anything else?
As the country hits a dire new record, more than 92,000 new cases in a single day. Hospitalizations and deaths are also going up. But the president is now blaming doctors and hospitals, implying they're inflating the numbers.
You know, our doctors get more money if somebody dies from COVID. You know that, right? I mean, our doctors are very smart people.
But once again, the president's own experts say that's just not true. This is his point person on testing.
We are seeing real cases increase. As a fellow physician, you know hospitalizations and ICU admissions don't lie. When those go up, that's real.
But the Trump team is ignoring reality. The president's son with this blatant falsehood.
Why aren't they talking about deaths? Because the number is almost nothing.
He made those comments as the country learned nearly 1,000 more Americans had died in just the past 24 hours, adding to the grim tally of more than 229,000 deaths. Biden today promising to embrace the science and lead the country out of this crisis.
So honk if you want America to lead again. Honk if you want America to trust each other again.
Biden's team thinks voters are fired up, and they see new opportunity in those long lines to vote across the country. In Texas, more than 9 million people have already voted. That's more than all of the votes cast there in 2016. But today, Biden's running mate Kamala Harris was there trying to get out the vote and flip the red state blue.
Today is the last day of early voting in Texas, and you all have been doing your thing. Now, we know this is no time to let up on the pedal, though, right?
Kamala Harris certainly hoping that Democratic voter turnout is full speed ahead there. Mary Bruce joins us now. Mary, Democrats in Texas have been pushing for the Biden campaign to make a play for the Lone Star State. What are they seeing there that gives them this optimism that the state could actually be competitive on Tuesday night?
They are encouraged by these early voting numbers. Lindsay, more people have now voted early in Texas than voted there in the entire last election. Democrats are watching this very closely, especially some specific counties, like Harris County around Houston. It is the third largest county in the country. Hillary Clinton won it by 12 points 4 years ago, and the turnout there has been completely shattering records. Now, Democrats do know that flipping Texas is going to be an uphill battle, but when they see these numbers, it gives them hope and optimism that it may be competitive.
And Joe Biden keeping his focus on the Midwest today. Where will he be spending his time this weekend in the final stretch?
Well, tomorrow he's going to be teaming up with his not-so-secret weapon, former President Barack Obama. The two of them will be holding their first joint campaign rally of this entire cycle. They'll be together in Michigan. And then on Sunday, Joe Biden heads to Pennsylvania. The president will also be there this weekend. He has 3 stops in the critical state tomorrow. And then the president is doing an all-out blitz. He is planning nearly a dozen rallies in just the last 48 hours, Lindsay.
Busy, busy. Mary Bruce, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Record early voting by mail this year means more ballots to count and likely slower election results in some key battleground states. But other states will be able to process their votes quickly, with a handful of swing states likely to give us a good sense of the state of the race on election night. So ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl has the story on which states we can expect to hear from early and which ones could take days.
President Trump keeps insisting we must know the results of the presidential election by election night. Today he tweeted, the election should end on November 3rd. We could know who won by late Tuesday night, but it could also take several days before a winner is declared. To manage expectations, 3 former governors of Minnesota, a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent, have joined together to urge people to be patient.
With so many of us voting by mail, it may take a little longer to verify a winner.
And that's okay. It's by design.
A delay just means our system is working and that we're counting every single ballot.
The key factor here is the massive increase in mail-in and absentee voting due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Those mailed ballots take time to process. Local officials must compare names to voter rolls and make sure everyone is eligible to vote and not voting twice. And in some states, votes are counted even if they come in days after the election, as long as they are postmarked by Election Day. And 8 states don't even start looking at the mail-in ballots until Election Day. Pennsylvania, for one, is going to take a long time. More than 2 million ballots in the state have been returned, and they won't even start processing them until Election Day.
I feel confident that the overwhelming majority will be counted by Friday, if not before.
But that doesn't mean we won't know who won the presidency earlier than that. It depends on how close the race is. In several key states Donald Trump must win, the counting is expected to happen quickly. Florida, Georgia, and Arizona, for example, are among the states where most or nearly all of the votes are expected to be in by election night. In Florida, they have been processing ballots for over a month, and with more than half of registered Floridians voting early, we could have a very good idea of who won the state shortly after the polls close.
Jonathan Karl joins us now. John, it sounds like even if there are several key states that could potentially take days to count, those few southern states could tell us a lot about the state of the race on election night.
No question about it, Lindsay. Here are 4 to really watch that will come in relatively early. Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas. Those are all states that Donald Trump won 4 years ago, 4 states that count pretty quickly. If he wins all 4 of them, we are in for a very long night, maybe a long election week, because we'll have to wait for the results in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, which will take longer. On the other hand, if Donald Trump loses any of those states, it is very difficult, if not impossible, for him to win re-election.
And we're certainly seeing this record early turnout. What are you hearing from the Trump campaign on how they're viewing all of this and what it could mean for the president's re-election chances?
Well, they claim that the Democrats have not banked enough of the early vote to really put them over the line on Election Day. This is what they're telling us anyway. They believe there are also a lot of new voters that are Trump voters who didn't come out in 2016. That said, Lindsay, the kind of numbers that we are seeing make it very difficult for Donald Trump. You would have to believe that in a state like Texas, you have a massive new amount of Donald Trump voters that have suddenly come out, voted early, voted absentee. So we'll have to see how the results come in. They are putting the best look in this. But one top Republican who I spoke to, who has been advising the president on his re-election, said the overall turnout number. He said if it gets to 145 million Americans voting, which would be very high, that they believe that Donald Trump can win. If it goes beyond that, and you've heard projections of 150 million and even higher, this Republican, this Trump supporter, acknowledged to me that he is very unlikely to win.
And already more than 86 million Americans have cast their ballots. All right, Jonathan Karl, thanks so much. And, of course, be sure to tune in on Tuesday night when I'll be with George Stephanopoulos, David Muir, and our powerhouse political team with the latest results on election night right here on ABC News Live. Joe Biden's trip to Iowa today shows his campaign is looking to expand the playing field, hoping to flip states that have traditionally stuck with the GOP in presidential elections. Farmers are, of course, a key constituency in Iowa, and views there are divided on the president's policies, from the trade war with China to his handling of the pandemic. Both have a deep impact on the economic livelihood of farmers. So ABC's Kana Whitworth traveled to Iowa to hear from farmers on what's driving their vote.
Lindsay Larson has been harvesting this land in Iowa for 40 years. But in August, he lost more than 500 acres of corn to the massive storm that tore through Iowa.
I know that we've just gone through one of our worst harvests in 2020, but I'm already starting to make plans for 2021.
The lifelong Republican farmer among the crucial base the president won in 2016 and is now relying on for a second term.
The farmers are unbelievable. They're the heart of this nation.
1 in every 5 jobs in Iowa are in agriculture, pumping over $120 billion into the state's economy each year, leading the nation in production of soybeans and corn, most of which is used for ethanol production. But U.S. farmers have been left reeling from the president's trade deals, devastating weather, and COVID-19. The federal government giving more than $37 billion in aid to American farmers.
In fact, some people say our farmers do better now than they did when they actually had a farm.
He says because of his bailouts, our farmers do better now than when they actually had a farm. Where's this guy from? Who does he think he is?
The government administered some aid from those times of tariffs, but it didn't amount to cover the whole loss by any means, not even 50%. So there's pain there, but on the other hand, I think somebody had to call China out, because they were not living up to agreements.
Supporting Trump's trade policies and fearing potential new taxes and regulations by Democrats, Larson voted for him again.
I understand that in the world market there's going to be times of pain, but the pain sometimes is necessary to get to an agreement where we can feel like we can go forward.
But the pain across the Midwest continues, hitting the rural residents like Wendy Johnson in Northeast Iowa.
There's something really innate in us about growing food.
After a career in fashion in Los Angeles, she decided to return back to her home state. She's been harvesting her land in Iowa for more than a decade, sustainably growing food on 2 farms. But she says the economic downturn has been devastating.
Those are concerns that I have, revitalizing rural communities, because a lot goes into that. Because agriculture is such a strong backbone to a lot of these rural communities and rural businesses. You know, we want to see our main streets active again, have shops and people in them. And right now they're dying.
Many consider farmers the original conservationists, and for Wendy, modernizing the farming industry is a key issue on the ballot.
Looking at the future of agriculture and not just the very present, because I think that we've done that for quite a number of years, just looking at fixing problems when we should be looking at prevention and looking at how agriculture is going to look into the future. There are candidates that are supportive of protecting soil as a natural resource and looking at the future of agriculture.
And for so many in Iowa, farming runs in the family.
Come here, Patch. Let's go to work. Come on. Well, as a little kid, I always rode around with my dad. So, I guess I've always wanted to be a farmer.
Mike Holden is a third-generation farmer, now weathering the weight of being on the front lines during the pandemic.
My wife works in a hospital. My daughter that drove by her earlier works in a hospital in Des Moines, commutes. We're frontline people. I work 7 days a week, virtually 365 days. But if I don't come here, they're not going to get fed.
But he's feeling the impact of how the farming industry has changed.
It's an interesting way of life that has really become more corporate. And I've farmed for over 40 years now, and I'm not happy with the way farming has become. The neighborly thing, the thing that you used to do because you wanted to help. Sorry, I get emotional here. You wanted to help because that person needed your help.
He says 90% of the time he votes Republican. This year, he chose to cast his ballot for Biden.
The money that the Trump administration then gave to farmers in Iowa to keep them afloat was welcomed, but not enough.
Yeah, it doesn't make up for the losses we had. It certainly softens the blow. I think it was bribery. I'm going to buy your vote. I'm going to throw you some money, and hopefully you'll keep supporting me. And they do, and I don't get it.
The bailout's not enough for him to overlook what he views as failed leadership and a lack of civility in the White House.
I think he's dangerously reckless. I think he's brutally insensitive and disrespectful. You can be tough without being a bully.
Yeah.
And we badly need some civility, in my opinion.
And Lindsay, most importantly, the farmers that I spoke with said no matter what happens on Election Day, they will still wake up early, they will go to work, they will do their jobs feeding the country. Lindsay?
Kana, our thanks to you for that report. And now to the COVID-19 crisis in America. Cases are surging across the country, now topping a staggering 9 million. ICUs are filling up, with some hospitals hitting a breaking point. And there are now new lockdown measures in place in Texas and Illinois. ABC's Alex Perez has the latest.
Tonight, the U.S. topping yet another grim milestone, 9 million cases and a record 92,000 cases in just the last 24 hours. Hospitals in Wisconsin running out of room.
Our COVID unit that has 3 wings, we were using 1, we're now using all 3 of them.
After shattering another record in Illinois, Chicago shutting down indoor dining, urging people to get flu shots.
I have already gotten reports of individuals with both flu and COVID at the same time.
In El Paso, Texas, a judge ordering a 2-week shutdown, but tonight a showdown with the mayor and the state, police refusing to enforce the order.
We also have 32,000 El Pasoans out of work. People are trying to put food on their table and pay for their own health care.
In Florida, 41-year-old ER paramedic and father Willie Rivera, who was on the front lines fighting COVID, losing his own fight after 2 months on a ventilator.
He did fight. He'd fight for his life to come back home to us. But I guess God needed him as an angel in heaven.
Just such heartbreaking stories. And for more now, let's bring in Alex Perez from Chicago, where there are new restrictions and backlash there tonight. Alex, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Lindsay, here in Chicago, indoor dining has now been banned once again, and across most of the state of Illinois, there are new restrictions as well. And we're seeing some of these restrictions pop up in different places like El Paso County in Texas and a few other areas. And officials are facing some backlash. People who say these restrictions are just going to hurt their businesses and that they need to get out there and do certain things. But the governor here and officials in other places say that they feel this is the last resort at this point to try to get the virus under control, because the numbers now are surging, sometimes in some cases worse than they were this summer. Lindsay?
Alex Perez, thanks so much. And when we come back, the stunning images of building collapse caught on camera and the tsunami in the streets, all triggered by a deadly earthquake overseas. The researchers spanning the globe looking for mysterious viruses that could cause the next pandemic, what James Longman found when he was with them. In the run-up to November 3rd, we have spoken to election officials almost daily, and we asked them the same thing. What has the most concerned as we lead up to the election? Just about every single one told us it's the misinformation that's out there. Up next, we break down fact from fiction. Welcome back, everyone. If you've seen our conversations with top election officials in key battleground states, then you've heard their warning that the one thing that concerns them most heading into Election Day is the spread of disinformation to voters. In the midst of a pandemic and an already confusing voting process this year, these attempts to create further confusion aimed at suppressing voter turnout, often targeted at minorities, pose a unique threat to Americans looking to exercise their right to vote. So what are the most common types of disinformation, and what's being done to combat it? We take a closer look in tonight's Ballot Watch.
As Election Day approaches, it's the refrain we've heard again and again.
What keeps you up at night, if anything, as it applies to this election?
Well, certainly the biggest variable is misinformation. And we've done an incredible amount of investment in educating our voters to not just know their rights and their options to vote this year, but to be prepared to counter disinformation or misinformation.
The thing that worries me the most is mis and disinformation about our election process. There are people trying to confuse voters.
Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson says the disinformation has come in multiple forms.
We've had robocalls, we have had false text messages, and various other things designed to confuse voters about their rights.
Just this week, 2 right-wing operatives were indicted in Ohio for allegedly devising a robocall scheme aimed at suppressing minority votes across 5 states, placing thousands of false calls like this.
Mail-in voting sounds great. But did you know that if you vote by mail, your personal information will be part of a public database that will be used by police departments to track down old warrants and be used by credit card companies to collect outstanding debts? The CDC is even pushing to use records for mail-in voting to track people for mandatory vaccines.
A federal judge also called their actions electoral terror using telephones, computers, and modern technology and ordered them to stop robocalls before Election Day. The 2 men have pled not guilty to similar charges in Michigan.
Disinformation and misinformation campaigns, along with voter depression campaigns, have been a steady part of the American political diet for generations. We also see accusations of electoral fraud, which are designed to intimidate people, along with, say, things like the closing of polling stations, very long lines. All of these things are designed to keep turnout down.
The Stopping Cyber Suppression program for the nonpartisan group Common Cause focuses on combating misinformation and disinformation flourishing online.
Disinformation is inaccurate information that is produced by a bad actor to try and harm someone. And then misinformation is kind of the same incorrect information, but presented accidentally usually, or without an attempt to cause harm. Some of the common disinformation tactics that can be really damaging are, one, social media posts that tell people the wrong date or time or way that they can actually vote. We've seen disinformation targeted towards what's happening with the coronavirus pandemic and falsely claiming that because of social distancing, there's some changes that are happening in our system in terms of when and where to vote.
As voters navigate an already confusing election season, some states are using outreach efforts to help identify false information ahead of Election Day. And voter education groups are working to counter misinformation, especially in minority communities, on how Americans can vote.
There's a lot of misinformation, particularly on social media, right? You cannot go into any social media and not see false information about vote by mail and how it is not safe and how it leads to fraud. What we're trying to tell people is that none of that is based on facts.
Communities of color and communities where there's a large immigrant population or English isn't always the first language are frequently targeted by voter suppression efforts offline and online. That follows just a long history of racial voter suppression attempts in this country to prevent communities of color from gaining the franchise and gaining political power. And what we see online follows right in that same pattern.
And with the final election results potentially up in the air for days, officials warn the misinformation threat doesn't stop on Election Day.
I am concerned that in the week between Election Day and when 100% of ballots are counted, that space could be filled with disinformation and misinformation, conspiracy theories, lies, things designed to undermine confidence in our election.
And we, of course, will be tracking it all so that voters have accurate information in the coming days. Still ahead here on Prime, the police officer shot in the botched raid that ended with Breonna Taylor's death is now countersuing her boyfriend who opened fire when officers stormed in. How are haunted houses adapting in the pandemic? And the rule change that might surprise you considering it's Halloween. And for so long, many have assumed apathy is the reason that younger Americans vote less often than older Americans. But up next, the new study that suggests that is not the case.
In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jong-un.
The president.
You trust him? I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange.
Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Whew. Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working out?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying?
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington, a very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News, straightforward.
We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. No bull, no spin. Now imagine getting your news like that. Just give it to me straight. ABC News, straightforward.
Another week in America, a country facing a new test now.
The Wuhan airport, almost no one here.
The last flight out of Rome.
This is the nursing home just outside Seattle. Dozens of people were just rushed off this cruise ship.
This is ground zero.
It is shut down.
Another ambulance just pulled out.
Now they're headed to the hospital.
Time is of the essence.
You can see the ship behind me.
This is the first time tests have been done here.
Morning, afternoon, evening, late night, 24/7. ABC News, there for you.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, free on Apple Podcasts.
Welcome back, everybody. And now we turn to the youth vote. Young Americans typically vote at lower rates than older Americans, but a new study by our partners at 538 found that it isn't because of apathy. We take a look by the numbers at what's going on and why this election could be different. Only 46% of young voters aged 18 to 29 said that they voted in 2016, according to census data. That's the lowest turnout of any age group. But we shouldn't assume that young people don't care. 22% of youth voters aged 18 to 34 said when they didn't cast a ballot, they had actually wanted to but couldn't, according to a survey by 538 and Ipsos. For example, 17% of young people said that they couldn't get off work to vote, but only 9.5% of older working age Americans had that problem. And 11% of younger voters said that they didn't receive absentee ballots in time, while only about 5% of older voters faced that barrier. But this election, youth turnout seems higher. More than 7 million young adults have already voted early, including more than 4 million in key battleground states, according to the research group Circle. And 78% of young people said that they're planning to vote this election, according to the 538 Ipsos survey, although the number who will actually cast a ballot will almost certainly be lower. And finally, a high youth turnout. It's actually good news for Joe Biden, since 53% of young voters said that they plan to support him, while only 24% say that they plan to support President Trump. Still lots to get to here on Prime. The major retailer reversing its decision on guns and ammunition. And it's a case that's been argued for decades. But 45 years later, what could be the final conclusion to the Kennedy cousin Michael Skakel murder saga? And remember to set your clocks back this weekend. Could this be the last time we do so, though? We'll explain. But first, to look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
The time has finally come.
We have to win. This is the most important election in the history of our country.
I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I will be an American president.
Who will be your next president?
I am your president of law and order.
I won't fan the flames of hate.
Election night, ABC.
We will make America great again.
This is a battle we will win, and we'll do it together.
ABC Election Night Live and on Apple News.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march.
You will not replace us!
Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
A last-minute push in the Midwest. First, President Trump in Michigan, former Vice President Joe Biden in Iowa, then both heading to events in Wisconsin and Minnesota. The president trying to make his case on the economy.
We opened it up, and now we're at a level. I used to talk about the V. This is a super V.
But COVID-19 is surging in both states. Minnesota has limited the president's rally to just 250 people after health officials linked at least 23 COVID cases to his rallies last month.
Unlike Donald Trump, will not surrender to this virus. I'm going to put in place a plan to deal with this pandemic.
Some reliably red states like Arizona and Georgia are now in play.
It's so good to see you, Texas.
Also Texas, which has already counted more early votes than all of the statewide ballots cast in 2016. Biden's running mate Kamala Harris making 3 stops there today, including Houston. There, Harris County officials have set up 24-hour polling locations for one day. Vice President Pence is also on the trail, making stops in Arizona, where 538's polling average has Biden with a 3-point lead. Pence trying to hold on to the state for the GOP.
Arizona and America need 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House.
Walmart says it is returning guns and ammunition to the sales floor today after pulling them off when protests erupted in Philadelphia this week over the deadly police shooting of Walter Wallace Jr. The chain says because the incidents remain geographically isolated, it decided to return the products to the sales floor. Walmart also temporarily removed its gun from the sales floor back in June during nationwide protests following the death of George Floyd.
California, Full House actress Lori Loughlin has reported to federal prison.
Lori Loughlin began serving her 2-month prison sentence for her role in the college admissions cheating scheme. She wasn't due to report to prison until next month, but prosecutors agreed she could begin serving her time sooner, provided she does not seek early release. Loughlin surrendered to the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, after she pleaded guilty to paying a bribe to get her daughters into USC as recruits for the crew team. Her husband, fashion designer Massimo Giannulli, must serve a 5-month sentence.
The state cannot prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Kennedy cousin Michael Skakel will not be retried for a murder committed 45 years ago today.
Michael Skakel appeared in court in Stamford, where Connecticut's chief state's attorney said there would be no retrial for him in the 1975 murder of Martha Moxley. Of the more than 4 dozen original witnesses, more than a dozen are dead. Skakel, the now 60-year-old nephew of Robert Kennedy's widow Ethel, has been free on bail since 2013 when his conviction was vacated. The Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated it and then reversed itself, saying Skakel's trial lawyer was inadequate. The state appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which declined to hear the case.
McDonald's is bringing back the McRib. For the first time in nearly a decade, fans will be able to order the barbecue sandwich at the fast food chain's restaurants nationwide when it hits menus for a limited time on December 2nd. The McRib, usually only offered at limited locations for a limited time. The restructured boneless pork sandwich, which actually looks like a shape of a mini rack of ribs, gained cult following since it appeared in the menus nearly 40 years ago.
Because the McRib is just what we needed in our lives right now. Welcome back, everybody. The death toll is mounting after a powerful quake struck parts of Turkey and Greece. The quake was so strong that it even triggered a tsunami. Maggie Ruley has this report.
Tonight, Turkish search and rescue teams pulling victims from collapsed buildings and desperately searching for others after that massive quake struck the region. Dozens of buildings collapsing in Izmir, Turkey's 3rd largest city. You can hear the woman recording this video weeping as they search the wreckage. Responders cutting through metal to try and reach a trapped man. A sobbing woman consoled as she waits by the rubble. This family's baby monitor capturing the moment the shaking started. More families flooding the streets. Rescuers frantically working for hours to get to a young girl trapped inside a crumbled building. Reportedly, she was pulled out alive. The powerful 7.0 quake striking just off the Turkish coast. It felt as far away as Istanbul and Athens. A cathedral on the island of Samos destroyed. 2 teenagers killed after a wall collapsed on them. The tremors triggering a tsunami there. Waves overtaking marinas and streets. Boats washed ashore. 1 person reportedly drowned.
Our thanks to Maggie. We turn now to a new development in the Breonna Taylor case. Jonathan Mattingly, the police officer who was shot and seriously injured in the late-night raid that left Taylor dead, is now suing Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker. Walker fired 1 shot, he says, when he mistook the officers for intruders, and Mattingly returned fire. Many tonight say that Mattingly and the other officers should have been charged with Taylor's killing and that this counter-lawsuit is an outrage. Our Steve Osinsami has more.
He is the face of law enforcement in this divisive case out of Kentucky. When they say her name, Breonna Taylor, who even the police now agree should never have been killed in her home, Jonathan Mattingly was the officer leading the charge outside her door. And this morning, the 47-year-old is suing the victim's boyfriend, who fired a shot through the door, thinking that the police were thieves. The police officer who was seriously wounded is now suing Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, accusing him of battery, assault, and intentional emotional distress. It was in the middle of the night on March 13th, and the officers say they loudly announced themselves before trying to break into the apartment with a no-knock warrant. But Walker, who is a legal gun owner, told investigators that he and Taylor asked who was at the door several times and heard no answer, and that he only fired a shot when he saw the door break open. In this countersuit, Mattingly says that he nearly died and needed 5 hours of surgery, and that Walker acted recklessly in firing his pistol in the direction of the police officers who were serving a search warrant, and that his conduct was outrageous, intolerable, and offends all accepted standards of decency and morality.
You were called racist. Mm-hmm. Are you racist?
No, not at all. But I mean, I was a victim in this as well. My family has been a victim in this. They have had to go in hiding. They have had death threats.
In an exclusive interview with ABC News and the Louisville Courier-Journal last week, Mattingly says he believes Walker deserves some of the blame for his girlfriend's death.
The impossible situation that Kenneth Walker put her in that hallway, with this narrow hallway, shooting from it, him diving out. I'm assuming she was trying to follow him in the room. I don't know that for sure, but that's what makes sense. He put her in an impossible situation.
Do you feel Kenneth Walker is responsible for her death?
I think there's a few people responsible. I think he is.
Walker filed his lawsuit against police in September. Criminal charges against him were dropped with prejudice, which means he could still be charged again.
The charges brought against me were meant to silence me and cover up Breonna's murder. For her and those that I love, I can no longer remain silent.
Walker's attorneys overnight say that they're shocked and that this is the latest in a cycle of police aggression, deflection of responsibility, and obstruction of the facts. The counterclaim just brings it full circle. If Kenny can be sued for defending himself, make no mistake, all lawful gun owners' rights are at risk, and that should scare everyone. Walker wasn't the only person who says that he didn't hear police announce themselves. This was an apartment building, and other neighbors say that they didn't know that these were the police either. This was an unfortunate and tragic incident that will now drag through the courts. Steve Osunsami, ABC News, Atlanta.
Our thanks to Steve for that. The coronavirus pandemic has brought renewed attention to infectious diseases, especially figuring out ways to fight them and prevent them from reaching people in the first place. So our James Longman went along with some of these experts as part of a National Geographic special called Virus Hunters. Here's a sneak peek.
Landing in Liberia is like landing on a different planet. It's definitely unnerving to travel during coronavirus. I mean, you've got all these people in their protective gear, you've got masks and visors, people with forms shouting orders at you.
So this is it. We've just got to Liberia. Chris has made it through, isn't it?
Finally.
Liberia was ground zero for the Ebola outbreak, and a place researchers are looking for the source of the next pandemic. If people are coming into contact with bats in this rainforest, they could be exposed to a new strain of Ebola or another virus. So this is something the government of Liberia takes very seriously.
Okay? Yeah. The animals coming from this side.
Moses is a ranger whose job it is to stop poachers. He and his team are our first line of defense.
So we're walking along this game trail, and we're not sure what we're going to find. You're standing at this abandoned mine, and you can only see maybe 2 or 3 meters in before it's entirely black. But in the kind of haze, you can see the kind of decrepit old bits of previous mining industry, and overwhelmingly, the squawk of all these bats. Their wings beating in the darkness.
Oh, you can hear them. And do you know what kind of species are inside?
This step is the fruit bat.
And so what we're doing here is basically just checking to see if there's any signs of hunting.
Yes. So you guys are stopping people from coming here. That's your job? Yeah, we stop them. Exactly. Masks on? Yep.
Masks on.
Oh my gosh.
All right, let's check it out.
Well, slowly. Yeah.
So you can see them right here.
Whoa.
Wow. So there's an entire colony in here.
Yeah.
This is the first time in my life I've been in a bat cave with bats flying around my head, but also in the knowledge that bats contain viruses that are dangerous to humans, and especially in places like Liberia, where we know Ebola came from, or all kinds of other viruses that we don't yet know about. So it really was kind of quite unnerving.
Oh.
Wow.
It was a relief to have Chris nearby, who was kind of quite relaxed about the whole thing.
For me, because I'm a complete wildlife geek, I think that this is one of the most beautiful things that I've seen, even though I know that there is this potential risk.
And people want these bats, right, Chris? I mean, these are valuable.
In many places, these are a preferred food item where people will pay almost a premium price for something. So this would be a prime hunting ground for someone to come in here and just collect a whole bunch.
Okay, and so if you came in here as like your average poacher, you're not wearing a mask, and there's no real protection, you could easily pick up any kind of it.
This is the exact type of almost transmission scenario where you are getting aerosolized urine, aerosolized feces, but also if you're killing the bats, you're then exposed directly to their blood as well.
Wow.
Can we walk a little bit?
Yes, let's walk in a little bit.
Wow, it just keeps going. This is absolutely insane.
A lot of the old iron ore processing equipment, I'm guessing, is that right?
And you guys, what are you looking for? What have you found? What, Moses, what is that?
This is a trap wire. It's for the animals in the forest. It was prepared by hunters. So it means someone brought in here.
So a poacher came in here and set that up?
Yes, exactly, yes.
Moses and his team find this trap, which seems to suggest that humans have been inside.
So you have hunters who are staying in this cave night after night, being exposed to bat feces, bat urine, bat bites. There's actually horseshoe bats and a type of fruit bat. Horseshoe bats are known to be related potentially to COVID and also to Ebola.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
And we go further and further back into the depths of the cave, and Moses looks down and he actually sees a whole host of dead bats on the ground.
You can see the dead one. This is the dead bat.
Wow. This is insane.
There are many, many, many on this. You can see this, the younger one.
This is a baby.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
This one is probably a juvenile or subadult. This one's definitely a juvenile. So what caused this one to die?
So you almost wonder if there was some sort of disease that spread through this community of bats. It would certainly explain why you have a variety of different age classes of bats that are all dead in the exact same spot. It feels like this is something that's really important to understand.
Wow.
And Chris is fascinated by this. And it could be that these bats have died of some kind of virus. It really does feel like we're in a front line of something unknown.
Young bats should not be dying, basically.
Not like this.
And I think, obviously, the issue is if there's a poacher in here and there's a dead bat and there's blood or whatever, right? So that's a problem.
So there's probably some sort of disease, exactly.
Bats were known to be the reservoir of Ebola. It also transmitted to other types of animals and then was transmitted to humans.
This is the exact way that a new deadly virus could start.
James Longman joins us now from Belgium, the heart of Europe's current COVID crisis. James, in your travels for this new special set to air on our partners Nat Geo, what was the most surprising thing that you learned about COVID and other potential viruses?
Lindsay, you know what? I think the thing I found most surprising is how comparatively lightly we may have got off with coronavirus. Now, that might sound shocking. Of course, people's lives have been ruined by this virus, but there are so many others out there. In fact, there is an almost infinite number of viruses, and coronavirus, whilst very contagious, is not as deadly as it could have been. And that's why we went to parts of the world to find viruses that have broken out and really killed a great many more people, like, for example, Liberia in West Africa, where Ebola broke out. You know, scientists have been warning for years about the potential of more pandemics. They've been breaking out, in fact, with more frequency. But things like Ebola don't spread as quickly, although they are really, really dangerous. And I was in that cave with bats flying around over my head, many of whom would have had coronavirus, possibly also Ebola. I've got to tell you, it was a little bit of a scary place to be, but it was fascinating because we learned so much about bats themselves. And we're getting close to Halloween. People often kind of vilify bats, but really bats are just a very good vector for viruses. There are something like 1,800 species of them. They've been around a long time, and they've got an incredibly good immune system. There's a lot to learn from these bats, and that's why these researchers are on the front line. I was so inspired by them, putting themselves at risk, finding out what we can from these animals to make sure that when the next pandemic hits, and it is a when, it's not an if, they'll be prepared. Lindsay?
And what can you tell us about the risk of these new viruses right here in the United States?
Well, that is also fascinating. We went out with a ranger in Wisconsin. Hunting is a huge part of life in the Midwest. In Wisconsin, in fact, there are something like 400,000 deer that are harvested every year alone. But they have diseases. CWD, chronic wasting disease. It hasn't jumped to humans, but it's part of a family of diseases that do affect humans. And these rangers go out to try to make sure that they can keep this disease under wraps. So if it does jump from the deer to humans, they'll know. But CWD affects deer in approximately half the states in America, so it is a really serious problem. The other big issue is industrial farming. You know, the American appetite for meat and dairy products is huge, and it's only getting bigger. The risk is growing with the appetite growing. So we went to a federal facility in Iowa, absolutely fascinating, where they screen all these animals. H1N1, pig flu, broke out in 2009 in the United States, and it's considered a national risk by Homeland Security in the United States, the possibility of a homegrown pandemic in the United States. And so industrial farming, another big flashpoint. The possibility of a pandemic arising from anywhere in the world is just around the corner, and that is why this work is so important. Lindsay?
Really some impactful work that you're doing along with the scientists, James, and I'm also in awe of your courage as well. Our thanks to you. And be sure to watch the 1-hour special event Virus Hunters, premiering this Sunday night at 9/8 Central on National Geographic and later streaming on Disney+. Well, this weekend we are going to set our clocks back Sunday and gain an extra hour of sleep, but there's a push to end the time change in part because of how it impacts our health. Ariel Reshef has more.
It's almost time again to turn back the clocks. But the end of daylight saving time made more complicated this year with many parents working from home.
Can you come make me lunch?
And millions of kids virtual learning.
In the afternoon and early evening, just to have that extra light is really important for everybody.
The Singer family of New York says the time change is one more major disruption.
My daughter is affected because she goes to school in the dark and she comes home in the dark. Just like a lot of people are going to work in the dark and they're coming home in the dark.
The American Academy of Sleep Medicine says shifting to and from daylight saving time has been associated with sleep disruption, mood disturbances, and even increased risk of fatal crashes. This at a time when sleep issues, anxiety, and depression are already on the rise during the pandemic. Now, the Academy recommending scrapping the seasonal time change altogether.
Standard time is actually most in sync with our internal circadian rhythms. And why that is so important is because those lights give us cues and tell our bodies when to do certain things.
For decades, some states like Arizona and Hawaii have kept the clocks the same year-round, citing the benefits of consistency. And as the pandemic persists, Florida Senators Marco Rubio and Rick Scott proposing a bill to do the same nationwide through November 2021. The Singers say in the meantime, they plan to make the best of it, trying to see the daylight at the end of the tunnel.
I just try to keep it status quo, and as long as parents don't make an issue about it, the kids won't feel it as much.
But many parents will enjoy that extra hour sleep, at least for now. Our thanks to Ariel for that. And still ahead, how haunted houses and the people running them are adjusting to the pandemic.
I've been quested to bring this one back to its kind.
You know this is no place for a child.
Wherever I go, he goes.
The Mandalorian, new season now streaming only on Disney+.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner of 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards, including the most prestigious honor, Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news choice. Good Morning America next week with the most consequential election of a lifetime finally here. Wake up to real-time answers, real-time data, breaking new details with the most powerful team in politics. Live on ABC's Good Morning America.
Welcome to Disney+. Are you ready? Drop in and explore. These are your worlds. Wherever and whenever you want them, you'll find them all here. on Disney+.
ABC News, America's #1 news source. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
Are you scared? Tomorrow is, of course, Halloween, and if you're looking to get the adrenaline rush of a haunted house, there are a few additional things to consider this year. Our Clayton Sandell has the spooky story.
It seems like 2020 couldn't get much scarier. But around the country, haunted houses are sure trying. Those spooky places where thousands pay to be terrorized are, like most everything else, threatened by a global pandemic. Chris Stafford is CEO of the 13th Floor Entertainment Group. They operate 15 haunts in 10 states. He took us behind the screams to show us just how the new era of socially distanced scaring works.
Yeah. Everyone's afraid of the creepy mannequin.
There's an estimated 1,200 haunt attractions in the U.S., scaring up as much as $500 million every year. But this Halloween, the CDC is recommending people avoid indoor haunted houses, calling them higher risk. Stafford says that's unfair.
I felt we're being unfairly classified as a mass gathering, and they're really not.
This year, 13th Floor says it's severely limiting how many people are allowed inside.
Most of our attractions are running at about 25 to 50% of what they would normally be running at.
At 25%, are you guys able to stay in business and stay alive?
You know, the way I've explained it is this year I'm in business to lose less money.
Halloween this year means masks aren't just for monsters. Every customer also wears one. Zombie actor Alexis Cooper wears 2.
I prepare by, getting the PPE mask on, making sure it fits properly underneath it.
Then she's off to makeup.
There's no touch makeup, so all of the makeup that we do is airbrush. Artists never have to come in contact with the employee or the actor.
You look great.
Thank you.
In a not so great kind of way. Is it hard to be scary with the mask and everything?
It's not hard. I think when you get used to wearing the mask after a while, you wear it every day anyways.
The actors are no longer allowed to scream like they used to, which of course can spread dangerous droplets.
So customer walks up, they get it right about here, and then you pop out, yeah?
So this year, Cooper now triggers a very loud sound effect. Customers may be too scared to notice, but this year they've made lots of changes to the floor plan.
You've had to redesign the layout to keep people 6 feet apart.
Yeah, what we did is we tried to use environmental props like a couch or something else where we could create a physical barrier between the actor and the group. So once again, just creating a little bit of a physical barrier between you and the actor.
Right. She is not having a good day.
Normally you're going through the haunted house, there's a lot of different things that are hanging in your face that you have to push through. Yeah. We've taken all the props that would normally be hanging inside the walkway, moved them to the outside of the walkway so the customers don't have to come into contact with anything.
Do you think it's any less scary this year?
I really don't. I don't know if it's maybe because we paid extra attention to how we were going to scare and getting more creative in the ways and the techniques that we were doing that. I don't know.
They're also using fewer live actors. Instead, more characters appear on screens.
Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary.
And many of the biggest scares, from monsters to aliens and zombies, are now actorless and automated.
Okay. Should have brought a change of pants.
Stafford's other haunted houses this year have transformed into socially distanced drive-ins. This one, called City of the Dead, is themed as a horror film festival gone wrong. And when the lights suddenly go off, creepy freaks emerge from the fog, surrounding drivers who have no escape. People who say Halloween must go on are snapping up tickets.
Any concerns about coming out in the age of COVID to a haunted house?
Not any more than any other activities.
This is my first haunted house.
This is your first haunted house? Wow. Are you scared?
No.
I've been watching them clean, and it seems pretty safe with the mask.
We're not just in the Halloween business. We're not just in the scare attraction business. We're in the business of tradition. And many families, this is a tradition for them.
Stafford believes haunted houses, especially this year, are critical to people's mental health.
Not just their physical health being the focus. And, you know, it's important, I think, more now than ever to get out and have experiences that help your mind get out of the day-to-day and just have that, at least even for a moment, to forget about all the craziness that's happening in the world.
Clayton Sandell, ABC News Live, Denver.
I don't know, I might just stick with bobbing for apples, the piñatas, but thanks for that, Clayton. Before we go tonight, our image of the day. Who are you going to call? This guinea pig. Even though trick-or-treating isn't what it's been in the past, many are still opting to dress up in some fun costumes like this one. Still some tricks, minus a few treats. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great weekend.